Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Michelle, your host and pocket DJ of Coffee Fueled Stories, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. This week's epic guest is for the 100th episode milestone. Welcome to the show, Victoria Price. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. 100th episode. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. I can't believe I'm here. It's been a love in progress, if you will. And your book, The Way of Being Lost, and your daily practice of joy has helped this little podcast come into fruition. So thank you very much for being the 100th guest here.
It's my honor, and I can't wait to hear all about how it helped.
It did. So to give you a background, how all of this kind of transpired, in 2017, I became a widow, and my world was just destroyed. And I came across your daily joy blog and photos on Instagram, and it helped so much to find something to be happy about, something to feel joy again, because it was, the lowest point of my life. And so to have you on the show, because it went from the lowest point of my life to the 100th episode, here I am 7 years later. So like, talk about like a circle of life, right?
Wow. And when you write a book, you never know, what happens. There's no control of what happens when it goes out there. So it means a lot to me to hear you say that. And same with the blog, as you know, I wrote it for me because I
Yeah.
was trying to commit to finding joy. And so the fact that it resonated for you, I'm just really thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you. And there's so many things. So from in the beginning, on page 24, you have joy is the great connector. And I totally agree with that. And one of the things that you called yourself, and I don't know if you still apply a lot of these things today, but you called yourself the winged warrior of delight. And that reminded me of, so one of the reasons that, so coffee brings me joy. So that's why Coffee Fueled Stories is my friends and I have been, since I've been a 16-year-old, sitting around drinking coffee, telling stories. Like that brings me joy.
I love that.
And so I've been told that I sprinkle coffee beans of joy. And
Hmm.
so your winged warrior of joy, of delight, reminded me of that. So again, everything is about this celebration of joy. And sometimes it's hard to find. And so these questions that I have for you, because you are a speaker, you do a lot of engagements, you go to a lot of horror shows, a lot of the cons. So my questions are related to writing. Like, do you still write a journal every day? Do you still practice writing every day?
I don't practice a journal every day, but I try to write something every day. So I'll go through kind of phases where I journal pretty consistently. But what I do find is that if I haven't been journaling for a while, something is off. And if I can just sit down, sometimes it's more like little notes to myself. Sometimes I'm reading something and kind of taking notes on what I'm reading. It's not, I think it used to be much more personal. It's less personal what I write now. But if I'm not writing, I find that I get off because writing is absolutely my joy. And during the pandemic, a friend of mine, after the first 3 months, which I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I completely enjoyed the first 3 months. I had been craving a spiritual retreat and it was like, okay, thank you. And then I was like, okay, we're going to be here for a while. So what is it that I would like to do? And a friend asked me that question, and I was making the usual list, and I realized I'd done a lot of those things. And so I thought, and then I thought, well, the only thing I ever wanted to do from the time I was little was write fiction, but I've only written nonfiction. And I don't really ever feel like it's me writing. I feel like it just comes through me, kind of like stories come through. And and I thought, so what? Only nonfiction can come through? Like, how's that work? And so I joined this group based out of England. I committed to writing I was doing a blog every morning. I stopped doing that blog a day, because I had a book coming out called Living Love. So that was my practice, was a blog every single morning. They were short, but I did that up till June, and then I switched. And I used that morning blog time to start working on this novel. And by the end of 2020, I had the first draft done. And it's just about ready to, finally, after many iterations, go out into the world. But what I'm really recognizing is, no matter what is going on, if I'm working on it, editing it, writing new sections, that is joy for me. And I think the reason it's joy is, and the same thing happens when I speak, is that if I thought it was me doing it, like I had to come up with this stuff out of my little, cranium, it wouldn't happen. It comes through me. And so it's it's this reminder that that can happen in every area of our life. But I think each of us, I think dancers have that, or singers have that, or athletes have that. So if you can find that thing where the thing that brings you joy sort of connects you to what needs to come through you and out into the world, and then, as I said, if joy is the connector, connects you with others, like a podcast, like telling stories with your friends, whatever it is, if you can find that thing, you have to make that a practice. And what you find is you want to, you want to.
Absolutely. And I love that. And so, would you be able to tell us anything about this particular book, or is that all under wraps?
Um, I'm contemplating, so here we go. I'm contemplating releasing it under a pseudonym,
Wow.
because one of the interesting things about being the kid of a movie star is, I'm in my 60s and I'm still Vincent Price's daughter. He's been gone a long time. And so part of me really wants this book to come out without me attached to it. Um, I've been reading a lot about pseudonyms, and from what I understand, like I read something about a woman who's one of the top, she's on the New York Times bestseller list all the time. She writes under a pseudonym, but she does podcasts like this. She does it because she's a practicing physician, and she doesn't want her patients to feel awkward, or, sort of like, oh, aren't you, what, who am I, and she still wants to practice. So I thought, it wouldn't be that I'm hiding, it's that I would like it to have the chance to just come out in and of itself. And I did feel that with The Way of Being Lost, like I would be talking to people about it, and I could see, and I think we have a tendency to do this, people kind of going, well, yeah, easy for you, you had all these opportunities, you were the kid of a movie star, you grew up in Hollywood and all this stuff. And I thought, the point is for us to find common ground and connection, not look for the reasons why it's you can't do it, but we all have a tendency to do that. We all have a tendency to talk ourselves out of things. So the book is it's about love, it's about friendship, it's about healing, and it's an idea that came to me a long time ago, and I reworked the same 10,000 words over and over again, and then I let the story tell itself to me. That's what happened during the pandemic. And that's what I discovered I loved about fiction, is that, and I think that's why my journaling has changed. I write less about myself because now I'm listening to other people's stories. So I think that's all I'm going to say right now, but I'm really excited about it. Like it brings me such joy. Even at the end of a long day of working for other people, I'll pull it out and noodle on, I'm just doing the final cleanup, and even that feels joyful. So
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I totally understand. Like I'm super excited. So like that to me is like a bonus. I had no idea that you were even working on that. So I will leave it at that and ask you other questions related to this book and some other things, cookbook even related. So one of the things that a lot of this will be hopefully not redundant, but in regard to resonating, because again, your daily practice of joy is what really helped kind of fuel this podcast and storytelling and connecting. So, a few things from the book that I'd like to mention is you. This is a quote: "Birds make my heart sing." And I feel that too. There's something about just watching birds, and we've got a cute little kitten, and he watches birds, and he gets so excited, and so he watching him, gives me joy in relation to watching the birds as well. But what really, really hits the point about connecting and storytelling and this podcast, and to have you on here, you have the part of the poem "Sometimes" on page 39, and this is quote, "Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it." And that's exactly like podcast. I have in my notes podcast, books, life. Like that's
Mm,
how I feel. Like pay attention, like birds, right? Or flowers. You talk about wildflowers. And so pay attention, be astonished, and then tell about it.
mm.
Like that's it.
Yeah, Mary Oliver, she knew her stuff. Yeah, I think that it's amazing. Well, think about it. We can walk up and down a flight of stairs, which is a potentially dangerous activity, and realize we haven't even been thinking. We can, I drive long distances because I'm a nomad, and I'll think, wow, I wasn't even paying attention. I was just driving, and we do so many things on autopilot. So, first of all, learning to pay attention, and I think during the pandemic, everybody discovered birds. I mean, birding went through the roof, because it was something you could do. And I thought like, yeah, right, they're there. And I still, I have bird feeders and I watch them all the time. And the joy. I was in California a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a hooded oriole, and you would have thought somebody had like come in and knocked on the door and handed me, $1 million lottery ticket. I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And it to really connect with the world around you and see it more deeply is huge. But so, you know, pay attention, but then be astonished.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. We go through so much of life kind of flat, and there is so much beauty, and there is so much connection, and there are so many people doing interesting things. I think that's why something like the Olympics just resonates with people, because we're given permission to be astonished. We're given permission to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person could do that, or I can't believe that person's story, or whatever. And then tell about it, because if you don't share it with others, if you don't have those kinds of conversations with others, then you're missing out on how it can all translate. I'm a nomad, but I have a little home base and a little Airbnb in Western North Carolina, and I live in a tiny little neighborhood. But we have neighborhood brunches once a month, and it's such a wonderful thing to have this group of people who are willing to get together, bring food, and gather, and you always hear something interesting. You always hear something interesting, and then you have the opportunity to share something interesting as well, and everybody leaves a different person than they arrived.
I love that. And again, that's why storytelling is that's the reason I decided to get my degree. I fell in love with books as a child. I have a tattoo to Lands Beyond from the Phantom Toll booth that I read at 10. Storytelling just transports you, and it's the same way with books and or when you're sitting and listening to someone. There's something about just being drawn in and being taken to that place. And like I said, to have you talk about this, and your, like I said, your book, I hope not to use the word resonate. I will find another word, but it's pretty much the perfect word. And I wanted to tap on one thing in regard to that. And I know that you are still a nomad, yes? You travel a lot, but
Home
you
base. Well, I haven't, where I'm at is a little tiny Airbnb carriage house. So that way I can close it up. I just got back from 6 weeks on the road. I'm going to head out for another 7 weeks on the road. But I also have learned how to be still and stay still longer. I still walk a lot. So, in a way, kind of the nomad, the need to move that I had when I was on the road all the time, um, now kind of comes out through the walking more if I'm staying put. But I had to learn how to be still too, which is also a challenge.
Absolutely. And that relates to, so if you see me looking down, it's because I've got 4 pages of notes here. So I'm going to try not to overwhelm you. But that you have a workaholism and perfectionism. And so does that still apply today? Are you still a workaholic? And in regard to like perfectionism, but have you, found a way to, do you have to work, like you said, do you have to work at being calm, work at being still? Or is it coming a little bit more naturally now?
It's really interesting because when the world stopped, I mean, I literally arrived at this Airbnb the day the world stopped. And not this one, but another one. And I was there for 10 months. And those 10 months, everybody wanted to have a stronger online presence. They wanted to connect with the world. So I kind of took what I did with 25% of my time and I began doing that for other people pretty much 100% of the time at first but I did a lot of online talks and online events that I hosted, but I also did this for other people. And then that kind of took over. And there was this moment where I realized that it had taken over to the point where I'd become a workaholic. And you can't really be a workaholic on the road because you can't take on that much work. There are days you just can't show up to clients. But the other part that I realized was that the the being on the road, the planning, the packing, the driving, it kind of filled the space that the compulsion of workaholism does. And so without that, I became a workaholic again, and it hit, slammed me over the back of the head. And I had to really learn. So for a year, I really worked on kind of unpacking it and not being a workaholic again. And then I had to keep doing it. But I feel that joy is really the key. What I realized was that if I wasn't doing the things that brought me joy every single day, then that's what sort of fueled the workaholism. It's not that I don't like work, and workaholics, I suppose it's like any kind of addict. You like the thing you do or drink or eat or, whatever. But I, or you believe you do, but I do like to work. But if I'm doing my own creative work, then there's an inherent balance and the workaholism doesn't come up as much. I also said to a friend this morning, which is interesting, I said, well, I haven't even thought about the way of being lost in a long time. I hope I remember stuff. And she said, oh, you always remember everything. And I said, actually, I've really made a point of letting go of that. I've really tried to not, I feel calmer if I'm not having such a busy mind. So I think I've really, and I find that's one of the things that happens when you write a book. You get out what you needed to get out and then you can put it away. It's in the book somewhere. You don't have to think about it. And so I'm learning to be calmer in my mind, and that eases it. The perfectionism, that's a real challenge. And I think it's about redefining the word perfect. If we're looking at perfect humanly, and we're trying to meet or match some kind of human standards, it's impossible. But if we understand that all of us are really created in love, and I mean love with the big L, and if we show up in love and live in love and respond in love, then inevitably what comes out is going to be perfect if you look at perfect in terms of love creating the response that's needed. Because if you think, oh, this person, somebody died, and I'm going to go over and say this and do this, you might miss what is really needed. But if you go over and you say, if there's anything you need, and you just let them know that you're there and that you're there because you care about them, then whatever's needed is going to happen. And that's a different kind of perfect.
Absolutely, perfectly said. if you will, storytelling in the service of spirit. And
Mm,
that is, your book, The Way of Being Lost. Like, if I could break it down, you have that as a section in there, and so it's the storytelling in service of spirit, and I believe that exactly. That's what connects us. That's why people sit down as part of community. People will sit and have a meal, and then after the meal, they'll sit around and they'll talk, and they'll continue to tell stories and share things from their past. So to to tap back into your journaling, if you will, do you have a favorite pen or journal or paper that you like to write with?
well, one of the sort of results of having become a nomad is I now write on tablets. And so at first I wrote on the iPad and I have the, Apple Pencil, but it just never felt great. So I read about something called Remarkable and I got one of those and I absolutely love it. It has a feel like a pencil or a pen. And you can change the nib. So I often write in like the one that is like a fountain pen. Um, and then not to be outdone, of course, Amazon tried to do something. So they came up with a Kindle that you could also write on. And so at home, I write on my Remarkable because you can have PDFs on there and you can make notes on them and you can journal and and one of the things I love about the Remarkable is you can have an endless page. I mean, it's like, I don't know how long it would be. You can just keep going on and on and on. And then when you are ready to switch like the month or the theme or whatever, you can turn the page. The Kindle, however, on the road, it's the Kindle Scribe, has the advantage of having, because I've always had a Kindle, because on the road you can't have, books. I'll buy a book sometimes if I'm on a lot of flights, because I like to read, a real book, and I can usually get it done if I'm on 3 or 4 different flights back and forth or something. I can get the book done and then I put it in a little neighborhood library. But the Kindle has all my books and you can write on the Kindle Scribe, you can write on it. So at home, the Remarkable, and on the road, the Kindle Scribe.
Very cool, very cool. It was when I got to thinking about it, uh, and travel, like journals, they can take up a lot of space as well. And I know one of my favorite things to do when I would be packing for a trip was to make sure I had my one journal and my one pen. But God forbid if you lose it,
Right.
then you're like, oh gosh, well, then you're like, well, I guess I just have to buy another one.
But also
But
there's the thing of looking back on what you wrote. And
yes.
then, all those journals, I had all of them with me when I wrote The Way of Being Lost. And I thought, I'm not doing that again. So now it's all in, files.
It's all digital. That's awesome. That's awesome. Talk how that's like an awesome way to be electronically nomadic regarding
Yeah.
writing. That's really cool. Um, so you talked about that first blog fear, and as a writer, one of that's like the biggest, I would say. So I'll speak from my voice. See if you agree. The hardest thing was I when I thought about blogging was okay, I'm gonna create a blog. I'm gonna put my name out there, and I'm gonna write these words, and I'm gonna put myself out there. It took me 3 years to create a blog because I was so terrified. Uh, there's something about that terror. And so my question to you is, did you have that same fear, that same terror when you put yourself out there for that first blog?
No, because I think I was pushed to the point of having no other choice. Here I had created this little space and time. I'd gone to this Airbnb in Santa Barbara. I was in this beautiful place. I had set aside time for myself. And I was doing these things that I loved doing, and I was miserable. And I was like, what the hell? So that day where I was in that rose garden and those rose petals, blew up in the air and all over me. And I had to come home and write that. And it was the act of sharing that was so joyful and it was so necessary. I mean, was there some sort of little fear there? Maybe, but I think everybody's incredibly loving response really made the difference. And eventually, I got to this place where I realized that a lot of what the daily practice of joy was about was writing my way through my blocks to joy, writing my way through my fear of not being able to be a joyful person. So I would say the writing part, because as I said, I've been that person who always has loved to write. The writing part wasn't what I was afraid of. What I was afraid of was, could I really be a joyful person? Could I show up and practice joy every day? Could I not go back into that dark place? And I mean, when I think I wrote this somewhere, that when I told my best friend about the fact that I was going to start this blog called Daily Practice of Joy, she was like, shouldn't you wait to see if it works first before you write about it? You're like the least joyful person I know. And I was like, what? So that was always in my head. And her middle name is Joy. And so I think we all have places where fear attaches itself to us and feels very real. In my case, it wasn't about the writing. Now, I will say about the fiction, that was why I got stuck on the 10,000 words, because I put writers on such a pedestal, people who were fiction writers on such a pedestal. And that's why it was this breakthrough. For me, all other kinds of writing and speaking were a spiritual practice. As I said to you, I didn't think I did it. And what shifted it for me is I burst out laughing and I was like, oh, okay, so that spiritual practice of letting it come through you only applies to nonfiction. And that was such a ludicrous idea. The idea that, right, no, you only can have nonfiction. Now, over there, Mary Oliver, she only gets poetry, and um whatever, whomever else, the many fiction writers I admire, they're the ones who get the fiction. You don't. It was so absurd that I burst out laughing, and that kind of just shifted it. And when I joined this group, and I'm going to give them a plug for anybody who wants to push themselves through writing, those first 10,000 words over and over again. It's a group called the Novelry.com, and they're based out of England. It's fantastic writing curriculum and amazing coaches and writers and tutors. And it's a fantastic organization. And speaking of joy, the woman who started it, she started it because she'd done very well in her first 3-4 novels, and then realized she was getting stuck. And in the process of sort of unsticking herself, she realized she was really enjoying this. And so she created this. Well, now it's super successful and she's done really well with it. But I think the reason she also has done well is I mean, they have many coaches, and they're very supportive. And one of the things she said very early on, when I started, she said, all of you can write. You're all here because you all can write. Now you need to learn how to show up to the practice, tell a better story, create better characters, not fall into the same traps. And so that also took away this kind of bugaboo of thinking there are talented writers and there are not talented writers. It's kind of like singing. There are people who are, absolutely tone deaf, but most of us aren't Beyonce, but most of us can carry a tune. Can you learn to carry a tune well enough to be in a choir? Yeah, if you're in school and somebody teaches you how to. So same with most sporting endeavors. There are some people who absolutely, let's say, can't do a racket sport whatsoever. But most people, if they have a basic lesson, can learn how to play tennis or pickleball or something and enjoy themselves. That doesn't mean they're going to Wimbledon, but they can do it enough to be able to enjoy themselves. And if you kind of take that idea of pedestalizing talent out of there, and you think about it, especially in terms of writing, the sheer number of books that are out there, you realize, I'm going to give another example. There's people who are very afraid of flying, right? If you go on any of the flight apps like Flight Radar and you look at the United States, it is just riddled with planes. But you're thinking of yourself on that one plane that is going to crash because some mechanic left a screw in something, or you're the one that, has the door that's going to blow off. But if you look at the sheer number of flights that are out there every single day, and it's one of the safest modes of transportation, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this was all ego. This was all, and it's the same with writing. And if you get the ego out of the way, then you find the joy. Once you find the joy, then you learn, then you're open to learning.
And that's perfectly said. I wanted to ask you, you are mentioning about if you fly, sometimes you want to take a book. Are you willing to share any of the books that you are reading or any books that you have read recently that have moved you in any particular way?
I've been reading a lot of fiction because one of the things that they say in the novelry is writers have two pedals, reading and writing. And so when I feel like I'm kind of looping around and around and around, then I usually try to read something. So on the last flight, a couple weeks ago, I read a book by Angie Kim called Happiness Falls. And it had an element of mystery that sort of drove the movement forward. It was a missing person, but it was really about a family and people and their relationships with one another. And it was set right at the beginning of the pandemic, like June of 2020. And it was a very smart book. And so that's the most recent book I finished.
Awesome, awesome. In the book, you had mentioned Angela Duckworth and her grit. I freaking love that book. I have it. I feel like I definitely have the grit gene, especially getting through everything that I did and learning. I kind of learned a lot of this stuff. I had friends, kind of helping me and guiding me, but getting through that time and dealing with everything that I was going through, and journaling helped a lot. I would write I would either write in a journal or I would write on my computer, and I would write love letters to the ether, as I called it. Um, but as you were saying, there's something like writing is so powerful. It's magical. It's cathartic. It's so many things. It's not just one thing.
Right.
And I think, and the best part is now it feels like reading and writing and talking about reading and writing has this new like revolution. Like there's so many format, like book talk. Never in a million years in my little 10-year-old brain falling in love with this one particular book did I ever imagine that there would be a thing called book talk and people would go
Right.
crazy for it.
Right. No, it's amazing. It's amazing what they've been able to do for authors whose books had been out for quite a while, and just their joy and enthusiasm in that book.
Yeah,
Boom.
yeah, and readers like finding a whole new source of people out there,
Mm.
and especially for self-published or indie authors. You think, okay, like for me, I finally at 53 I published. So at 51 I started my first podcast, and at
You
53
look like you're 20.
it's a filter. Uh, thank you. But at 53 I finally decided, you know what? I'm going to write my book. And so what I did is I put my blogs together in a book. And I was like, it's a story. It tells a story. It's
Right?
um, you had mentioned the broken Etruscan that's in my notes here. It's like broken Etruscan pot
Hmm.
in the way of being lost. And um public speaking. So kintsugi is actually the word that I use in my book. And so I thought, how awesome to have this correlation about finding just because something is broken doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose. Like you can put it back together, you can piece it back together, and it works again, it functions again. So even though my little broken heart, with it was shattered in a million pieces, it was put back together and brought to in service of others, if you will. Like
Yeah.
again, how cool is that?
No, and I think also it's the recognition that sometimes we have to, if you look at it literally in terms of what we see here as our sort of the dash between the dates, right? You look at things humanly, you think, why is there so much hardship? But if you look at your life and you think about the times that transformed you, that you learned the most, that you gave the most, that you contributed the most, they're almost always prompted by something that's challenging. And so maybe it's about shifting your POV from something challenging being bad to an opportunity to demand the blessing from any situation. And that blessing not just being like, oh, I want my life to be better, but something, look, it's exactly what you did, something that can help others, that can really profoundly change things for others. You've
Absolutely.
done 100 podcasts because they resonate to people. If if they didn't, you wouldn't still be doing it.
I- it's crazy. It's beyond belief. Like I still have to pinch myself and think, wow, this, and again, I know I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, the others who support it and listen. So thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody who's listening and sharing and supporting. Um, I wanted to ask you, so I'm going to ask you some silly questions, if you're
Okay,
okay with that.
I'm ready.
All right, sounds good. So, do you still speak German by chance?
I do.
That's awesome. Could you say something just off the top of your head for us in German, please?
Ja, also ich habe ein Jahr in Deutschland gewohnt mit einer tollen Familie und sie haben mir so viel gegeben und ich habe Liebe gelernt von meiner deutschen Familie.
I love that. All I heard was something about love and your family, and that was just really awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So, as you were saying, you're a nomad, so hopefully these questions are okay. But one of the things that terrifies me about traveling is sometimes some of the bathrooms that you're going to run into. Sometimes you run into some really good ones, sometimes not so much. So my question to you is, sometimes you get the really weird keys to go to use the restroom. Do you recall a time that you had like the silliest, oddest key thing to use the restroom?
Wow. The ones that are always, I think, hilarious are the ones that they make gigantic, like they're the size of your head because they don't want you to lose it or take it away with you. So you've got this, but then you're in some usually like skeegy bathroom. Like, why would you ever want to keep the key to that bathroom? Like, you can't wait to give it away, and it's sticky and gross, and you can't wait to give it away. So I don't remember any specific ones, but as a group, the ones that are just far too big are the ones I remember.
Right? It's
That's
just
a hilarious question.
thank you. So I don't know if this applied to you in, say, teenage travels, but this is kind of what popped into my head. So bear with me. It might not be relevant to you today, but if this ever happened in your travels, um, have you ever had to wash your clothes in the sink at a hotel?
Oh yeah, I do it all the time. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's something you have to wear, or it's the clothes you want to take home on the plane, or you spilled something on it. And, if you don't do it right away. So, yeah, my dad always he traveled very lightly. He would lecture 60 cities in 65 days, and he often rinsed things out in the hotel and then hung them out. So, yeah, no, I've done it.
Awesome. So now you have participated in the cookbooks of your family. Now, do you cook? Are you a cook? Do you have a signature dish, or did that skip you as far as the generation?
I'm a picky eater, so I cook for myself pretty much every meal. I would say I'm an unadventurous cook. I'm a boring cook. And I was just in the south of France and was shopping at all these amazing outdoor markets. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be more adventurous. I'm going to try things. So the other day I was at a farmer's market and the guy had soft shell crab, and I love soft shell crab. So first of all, I grilled him, like, what can go wrong? He said, they're the easiest thing in the world to make. And I was like, really? And he said, and I've cleaned them and they're, there's no, they're just to put them in there. And so the other night I was so proud of myself. I made soft shell crab at home. I was just because I'm a lazy cook. When you live by yourself, you don't want to. I love soup. And sometimes I'll just make a big thing of soup and then I'm eating that damn soup for weeks. I eat it for 4 or 5 days as long as I can. I freeze the rest of it. I live in a tiny home. So, but I'm vowing to be more adventuresome. And I guess one of the things I still love to make, my dad and I made together are pancakes. So,
And I mean, come on, pancakes, like that just brings pure joy. Like
yep,
that in and of itself, like even just saying the word pancakes, like you can't not smile. Like
exactly.
I dare you listeners, I dare anyone to say pancakes and not smile.
And pancakes are a big part of my upcoming book, the, the fiction. So,
That's super exciting. Pancakes. Like my cheeks are hurting right now. I can't stop smiling. So in all of your travels, and you do still travel, you do tours, correct?
I do tours, I go to horror conventions, I give talks. Yep, all of that.
So is there a country that you haven't been to yet that you hope to visit soon and or take on tour?
Many, many countries. Yeah. And I've there's many countries I haven't been to. I mean, it's almost sort of not worth saying the number of countries I want to go to because I may not get to them. So what I've tried to do is recognize that if I don't get to some of the countries that I've been longing to get to, I'm grateful for the ones that I have gotten to.
Excellent. And
I
now,
don't
oh,
subscribe
yes,
to the
sorry.
whole bucket list idea of travel.
That makes sense. Uh, in the way of being lost, you had mentioned that you cooked 250 loaves of bread.
Uh,
Do you ever make bread? Like, did that ruin you for making bread? Are you just done with making bread?
I don't make bread, no, that and but I do every so often I'll make little rolls and things like that. But no, the whole no. It didn't ruin me for it, but I know you've got to really have the right equipment and living in a tiny home, I definitely don't. So
That totally makes sense. Um, the so you talk about horror conventions, and that is like the way that you talk about the horror fans and the horror conventions and how it came to be is just it's so freaking cool. And so I wanted to ask you because you're not necessarily into horror things, but have you watched any horror movies or tried to start any horror movies?
other than the ones with my dad in them, no. Short
And
answer, no. I don't like scary things. No.
totally understood. Totally.
I guess I did watch a million years ago the Blair Witch Project because everybody said it was sort of a different, it wasn't gruesome, it was more, so and I've watched things like, which I don't think they're horror. So I like Wednesday, I loved,
Yeah,
and that's not horror.
it's
So
Adam's
if that
family. I mean,
counts as
come on.
being sort of vaguely in the horror genre, Wednesday. I loved Wednesday.
Absolutely. Have you ever dressed Allie in Halloween costumes when
When
you
I'm at a convention right before Halloween weekend, yes, she's been, let's see, a mailman, but that was actually for my mailman. She brought him out a little present in her mail outfit, and he loved that. She's been a convicted felon. She's been a devil. Yes, so I have subjected Allie to costumes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I have exhausted my notes. I want to say thank you so much for your time. I, like I said, the whole way that this has circled about has just been crazy. Horror to kind of saved my life in a way. I went to my very first horror convention through the Horror Writers Association and found my tribe with them. And so Crystal Lake, they do a lot of things with the horror and dark fiction. So all I can say is your daily practice of joy brings me so much joy, and coffee brings me joy daily. I kind of do like a little my own little like meditation with it. So I've got my coffee here. But I wanted to ask you, in final questions, I wanted to ask you, what tea is your preferred tea?
You know, Trader Joe's makes actually a great tea. It's their ginger turmeric herbal tea, and it's sort of a very mild ginger and turmeric tea, and I can drink it daily. It doesn't feel like it's super gingery or super turmericy. They have a good combo and it's super affordable. So that's my go-to tea. I The nearest Trader Joe's is about 45 minutes away. And during the pandemic, my friends would just send me because if they lived near Trader Joe's, they'd send me boxes of the tea. And sometimes they don't have it here. So I'm always asking people to send me Trader Joe's turmeric ginger tea. So, but I'm good on it for now. But I do want to say that I don't like scary things, but I say this all the time. I love horror fans. They taught me about the importance of having a heart tribe. And that what a real heart tribe does is it welcomes people who are not like them. And I'm actually starting something, just sort of testing it out, which I'm calling Oddity. And it's a place where it's called Oddity and then it's different together. And the website's up, it's oddity.oo, but I'm just slowly, kind of testing it. But one of the things I love about the horror community is that because so many people who are drawn to horror have been drawn because they were mocked or teased or bullied or ostracized because they were different in some way. And I always felt different. I didn't feel like the other kids in Hollywood, and I just never felt like I found my tribe. There's things that I love that I find, certain people that I can talk to about them. But the horror community really taught me that if we approach difference as a connector and we can find joy in other people's differences, and that it's not so much about how you're different, but it's recognizing that we are all different. And so if we don't see that as a divisive thing, but as a connective tissue between us all, then we can embrace our oddity and the world becomes a much richer place with so much more potential and possibility. Who wants a world of Stepford wives, people who are all the same? And so I'm kind of excited. It's going to have 4 components. It'll have a blog, a podcast, and the blog will mainly be me, but other people as well. And then the podcast will be me interviewing people who consider themselves embrace their own oddity and use it to bring people together. And then it'll have some fun merch because I'm thinking, like if you're wearing an oddity t-shirt, that somebody's going to say, oh my god, I love that, and then you can have that kind of, because it says oddity different together. And then last but not least, a community, an online community where people can connect. So it's something I'm just slowly rolling out, and I was really drawn to do it because of the horror community and the heart tribe, and realizing that I want everybody to have that opportunity. I want everybody who feels that they're different, but maybe there aren't conventions for the ways in which they feel different. I mean, I couldn't go to a horror community if I didn't have my dad, because a horror convention, because, I wouldn't want to watch those movies, but I would be so much less, I would have so much less rich of a life if I didn't go to the horror conventions, because I said this recently, that if I was like crawling on my last leg toward 2 buildings, and one was a church and one was a horror convention, I would 100%, 1,000,000% go to the horror convention, because I know that that's a group of open-hearted, safe, loving people who would help me, whoever I was. I've never met kinder, gentler, more loving and accepting people than horror fans. And so I want to sort of take that as a model and help all of us who feel like oddities come together and be different together.
That is freaking awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm excited for your book. I'm excited for the website. Like I said, I'm going to tag all that stuff in the show notes. So I'm going to help spread the word about that. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for taking the time to talk about everything in your book and the horror community, because it's like I said, it there's so much that connects us, and I 100% agree with everything that you were saying, and I feel the same way about the horror community that you were just saying. And on a very last note, my tagline for the show is "Go forth and be magical," and I would love if you would please sign us off with a "Go forth and be magical."
Absolutely. Go forth and be magical.